Welcome to the Michigan Runner Show. Join us each time as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great sport.
Hi, I'm Jennie McCafferty, and I'm in Huntington Woods, Michigan, and we have a very special guest today. He's Maury Dean. How are you doing, Maury?
I'm doing very well, Jenny. Nice to see you again.
Yes, it's very exciting to get together after people have been quarantined for too many months. What we're here to talk about today is this book. I can't hold it very long because it's like almost 6 pounds, and you're responsible for it.
I take full responsibility. Yeah. It's the world's biggest jumbo pamphlet.
Well, I'm not even all the way through it, and I've had a blast. It's really a lot of fun. It's, as you put it, it's a memoir, but throughout you're providing advice to runners, which is part of what makes it really interesting. Tell us a little bit more about how you got started on this big project.
Well, I ended up with a series of logbooks, and then I ended up with, much more importantly, a series of friends in the Bohemia Track Club that my wife Tony was in as well. And then, of course, I always ran in Michigan, because I started out here at Dearborn High. And so naturally, there are many stories unfolded in all of the races. And so I took it upon myself to try to write them down and, make heroes out of the people who already were anyhow, but the people out there didn't know it.
One of the things I thought was pretty interesting was, and there's a quote from the beginning, why our glory days can help inspire yours. So in many ways, your audience is people who want to run faster.
That's right. The demographic for this book is everyone who's ever run around the block or thought about running around the block. It covers the Olympic champions, but it also covers the local circuit runners and what I like to call second-string superstars. And it covers everyone who's ever run or went to the local 5K for fun or for charity or anything else. It covers the world of running. And I like to illuminate the stories of all these good people because they deserve to be in books just like the big baseball, football, basketball stars.
Well, that's really what makes it fun, is because there's stories of so many familiar people. And I also want to mention that you have another huge interest, and you've written about it a lot, and that is music.
Yes.
In fact, you have a book in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Tell us about that.
It all began back when I was in graduate school, and my wife Tony was working at the city of Detroit as a recreation instructor, and I started skipping class because I had this vision. I wanted to write the history of rock and roll, which was only 10 years old or so at the time. And so I had no resources except my imagination and remembering names of songs. And in 3 weeks, I wrote longhand, a history of the rock and roll called The Rock Revolution. And it got printed, and it did pretty well in Detroit, 95 cents. And it's the only time in my life I could write a book 144 pages long. I have chapters longer than that.
So rock and roll itself is interesting. How did you get, well, this is a silly question for anybody of our generation, how did you get interested in rock and roll?
I couldn't help myself. It was a little different from some of the syrupy romantic songs of the early 50s. And it was, talking about my generation. And there was James Dean out there. My name was Maury Dean. And so he didn't even do rock and roll. But then Elvis arrived. And then when Buddy Holly started hiccuping, I became the ultimate fan. So, and then into the Beatles and so on.
I still think that our generation has the best music, but there we go.
I have to agree.
And also, baseball is another theme in which you show interest.
I grew up a Tiger fan. In New York, where we often live, you have 2 or 3 teams, and people, they squabble with each other about which one is best. We don't have that problem here in Detroit. We root for the Tigers, and even when they're in last place, and sometimes they're glorious. And so I wrote this book, Who's Your Tiger, which has been kind of in the basement at Co-America Park for a while. Now they put it up on the shelves at the end of last term, the end of the season.
Well, among the pieces of advice that I found really interesting in Glory Days was, we all know that we're supposed to run on the left. It's safer. But you actually tell us that it's 5 times safer. I want to know more about how you discovered that.
I researched it as best I could from several sources, and you get a variance there. But in terms of fatal accidents and so on, it seems like most of the people are on the right side of the road thinking it's the right side of the road, but it's the wrong side of the road. And so you can look through all publications by everyone, from Dr. Sheehan to Jim Fix to, all kinds of running writers over the years that, the safe side is facing the traffic. I got that from my mother when I was 4 years old, walking to a fireworks show in Rochester. We walked down a busy road, and she said, you must always be on the left. So I actually listened to my mother.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's pretty cool. Well, I've enjoyed the vignettes and the profiles you've written about so many people. I want to mention a couple of them. Ed Whitlock.
Ed Whitlock, an amazing runner. I was talking to Doug Goodhue, our national champion from Michigan, the other day, actually a week or maybe a little while ago. And he said he knew Ed Whitlock. And Ed was a fine runner. He broke records in every age group. And recently our own Doug is challenging him in some of those age groups. Ed was from Canada, as my father was, by way of Scotland. But Ed Whitlock got into marathon running because his son was interested in running, and he became a superstar later in life. And personally, I didn't do quite that well in high school in terms of my cross-country team. I couldn't get a varsity letter in high school, but I had to, get through the ranks and start running against county champions when I was in my 40s. So I sort of allied myself with Ed Whitlock along those lines.
Well, we had a chance to meet Ed when we covered many races in Canada for quite a few years, and he's a pretty cool guy. So it was neat that you mentioned him. And there are a couple of Michigan guys, Jim Forshee.
Jim Forshee, big Jim Forshee. I remember him and Jerry Johncock. They were always racing in their 70s and 80s. And I remember developing a great case of humility when once I ran what I thought was a super race at age 40 at the Bobby Crim. And I ran, although they got me in something like 59:04, I thought it said 58:58 because the clock always tries to grab a couple seconds. But so I thought I ran 58:58, and I was beaten by a 58-year-old man and his daughter who rode for Michigan Runner.
So John Cocco's always pretty interesting because he's still running. Yeah, I think he's like 99 by now or something. I'm close. And he always ran with a singlet, "Run for Jesus," and so that's all. That's how everybody knew who he was. Okay,
excellent. Can't have a better running partner in terms of maybe some blessedness involved. There are a whole lot of runners in New York Road Runners Club named Jesus. Okay. And so anyhow, yeah, Jerry Johncock, fine runner. Tomorrow we're going to see Harrison Hensley, one of Michigan's greatest runners. He's 89 and telling me to drink pomegranate juice.
And he's a great runner, but he's maybe more well known for his race, which is
Run Through Hell. We've run many times through hell. The last time was 2018, and right when we saw the devil by the side of the road, with the trident and the horns and the red suit, I was running with an angel. It was a young lady, about 40 or so. One of her wings had fallen off, and she was carrying it, and we crossed the line together. I think she beat me by 3 seconds, but I lucked out on that.
Did you run the 10-mile or what Harrison always called the wimpy race?
No, it was only a 4.8 Maybe it wasn't. Yeah, I ran the 4.8 mile race, which is like a 5 miler in terms of the hills and heat.
Anyway, Harrison's a character, and we've all been grateful to know him. And I also want to bring up Maggie Zadar.
Maggie Zadar is one of my favorite people. Her picture's in the book several times, including the Boston Strong item, where she was running the Boston Marathon the year after. She came very close to the Mad Bomber, who's now on trial again. And she's extremely brave. She's run 170 marathons or some such thing. I have to sit down when I just think about that. And, she's gone through some health issues and so on, and she keeps on going.
I think people have applied the term Energizer Bunny to Maggie because she's just so consistent. Yeah. So another guy that you mentioned was Joe Thornberg.
Joe Thornberg, I mentioned him more than once, and it's due to my rather complete collection of stats from races. I think I met Joe once, that was it. So I can't tell any good stories about Joe Thornberg. Maybe you can, but as far as I know, he's one of the top runners. And I want to take this time to congratulate you for your best of times that you worked on so hard all those many years. And my friend Ed Melnick would like to do so too. His name is, books by Maury Dean, stats by Statman Ed Melnick. And he did the Long Island version from 1981 to 2019 of all of the best times, 5-year age groups, for various distances from 5K on up to marathon. However, he didn't do 1992 through 95, which was my heyday, so I had to kind of fill that one in a little bit.
But people get really invested in those, and I remember some of the conversations I had with people who thought they should have been included.
Some of them were not pleasant conversations.
Yeah.
I remember telling Ed about that.
Yeah. Why don't you have a 25K or something? They wanted that distance. I wanted to finish up the Joe Thornberg story just because I met Joe, had a long conversation with him at, I think it was the Big Bird Run, and not too long after that he passed away. And I read his obituary and discovered that he not only went to Notre Dame, he graduated the same year my dad did from Notre Dame. And I wish I'd known it,
Incredible. Yeah. Jack Kuhn is the quarterback at Notre Dame this year. He went to Sayville High School. And I have a report of a race, West Sayville, New York, where I happened to be in a 5K race, and I actually ran a minute faster than Jack Cohn. The only difference was he was 11 years old. But now he's their quarterback.
There's one other there's a lot of interesting people you mentioned, but one especially I wanted to bring up, and that's Ellen Page, whose resume is way more interesting than most people's.
What a hero, National Football League. And I think they fined him for getting down to 245 pounds so he could run the marathon. Yeah. I also have a story in there about a guy who is one of the heaviest runners of all time ever to run sub-18s for 5K, but that's another thing from New York.
Well, after Ellen Page ran the marathon, he got onto his new career, which was the law, and he eventually became chief justice, but a justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Yes. There's such a poignant story about him. Did you read what I read?
Tell our viewers.
It was all about how he played, I believe was it the tuba? Something, right? When people go by in the marathon, everyone claps. But he's out there playing his tuba. And not a lot of people can play a tuba, but he's big enough, strong enough. His wife had passed away, and everybody knew that. And people just stopped their own marathons and ran over to give him a hug or something to tell him what a wonderful guy he was, and a great runner, too.
Pretty cool guy and pretty much known as the best defensive lineman of his era.
Right.
Yeah.
And he broke 4 hours in the marathon.
after he lost all the weight. Yeah. So, talking about races, you have won some, including the Fountain Centennial 3-mile road one. What's it like to win a race?
I didn't know for 40 years. And then I didn't know for 40 years, for 30 years after that Tony won the race. It was her hometown. But then a snag came up just recently that maybe she was the second woman in the race, and that there was some high school hotshot who was a little ahead of her. But she was 9th overall out of 64 runners. And I just chased the fire engine. I had to drive 1,000 miles to this part of Michigan to find 64 runners slower than I was. And so it was the right time, and I think I ran 16 something or other. It was like a 17:35K. But at any rate, I was 40 years old, and they took a picture of it. It's in the book. Still got the cowboy hat on the wall in the at our living room, and it was a super situation. And then we had the beer tent afterwards because it was the Fountain Centennial of this little town of Fountain where Tony was from a dairy farm in Michigan. And I never knew anybody from a farm before, so we met at Michigan State, and the rest is history. But at any rate, I won the race, and I won about 8 races out of 1,000 races. But I got started at age 40, so.
Well, Maury, the running scene has taken you to a lot of interesting places. You've traveled around quite a bit in just Cow Harbor, East Meadow, Hyde Park, Rockville Center. Tell us about some of the travels you've had.
Long Island is 120 miles long and only 15 miles high. And so Long Island is an incredible travel situation to go from one race to the other. And we're located in Patchogue on the South Shore, Great South Bay. And what that means is you can go 65 miles out to Montauk Point, or you can go into New York City and run with the New York Roadrunners Club, and that's 60 miles away too. So it's always a lot of travel unless you have something right in Suffolk County where we are. Nassau County is the one close to New York City, and Suffolk is the one that is 60-some miles long, maybe more. It's really a very long county, 1.3 million people. So we have on Long Island over 3 million people, irrespective of Queens, and of Brooklyn, Kings County. So that's totally part of Manhattan, and of course you got Staten Island, the Bronx. But so just over 3 million people in the main 2 counties out east. And so we have races everywhere all the time. And you can pick several, just like in Michigan. So it's like 1/3 of the population of Michigan.
Wow. Okay, but it's also a little bit smaller than Michigan.
Yeah, Long Island is America's smallest continent.
Wow. That's fair enough.
Right.
Are there races is it Hempstead?
There are races in Hempstead. A lot of races out of Plainview, the Greater Long Island Running Club, Mike Polanski and crew. It's the biggest club on Long Island, and they do a magazine called Footnotes that I've written for, like I've written for Michigan Runner. And we had Island Wide Runner out of Amityville, where Ralph Epifanio was from, and that was from the 80s. And so I was a columnist there, and I was I'm a frequent columnist with Footnotes. And so we have races probably on any given weekend, except the marathon weekend. New York City Marathon might only be 3 or 4 races on Long Island. And sometimes there are those of us who know where the competition is coming, and we have a tendency to look for the secret race if we're, shameless hardware hunters looking for a medal or something.
The races on Long Island also bring in a number of people that you're going to see at every Long Island race.
There are a lot of circuit runners over the years, and some of them are legends in their own time, just like Joe Thornberg and Big Jim Forshee and Ed Whitlock. On Long Island, we have Bert Jablon, 94 years old now, former jockey, Air Force in Korea, tremendous runner. And somehow he's like 5'6" and weighed 110 pounds. I haven't weighed 110 pounds since I was 12 years old. And, I struggled to get down under 140. But then we have Mike Robles, who's a famous columnist there, and Peter Martin in the 60s and 70s. And I feature Chapter 6, two of my best friends, Ted Heyman, who's one of the great runners of all time. At 40, he ran like 31:55, fourth fastest master in the country. He's not running so much now. He's retired. And Joe Cordero, who was the national champion just a year or so ago, he's 83 now. And Joe is, he was my mentor in so many ways. He ran in the Air Force in '56, and he won a mile, and they gave him the strangest possible trophy. It was an engraved cigarette lighter. Now, if there's this last thing a runner needs, it's a cigarette lighter. Maybe he'll have a beer, but cigarette lighter? I mean, it's really weird. But, sadly, Joe is down with COVID right now, and we're, praying for him and hope that he gets better. So we have I've got a lot of friends in running over the years, and that's what my book's about. It's about my friends and how well they did in all their races.
Well, one of the things that I noticed is you're talking a lot about people you're literally competing with. In other words, you're one of those people who wants to be first. As somebody ran at the back of the pack, I was happy to be first in an age group once in a while.
I didn't always have Vince Lombardi's attitude. Winning isn't the only thing, or everything is the only thing. But over the years, once I got the marathon fever, I wanted to qualify for Boston. I just wanted to do as well as I possibly could, and did pretty well.
Yeah. What are some of the race courses like on Long Island?
Flat, just like Michigan, except the North Shore. Cow Harbor's kind of tough. My wife Tony ran that. I got injured there. She had an amazing career as I think she ends up in best of times a couple of times in her 40s. And I remember running on a similarly flat course here on Livonia, the Road Runners race, you know that one? And I'd run the Toury race earlier in Flint. And then later that night I had to run with Tony. And she broke the 7-minute mile for 5 miles and won her age group. And fortunately, I didn't have to compete because Tony Mifsud ran a 25:19, almost 5 minutes a mile, and lost to Bill Stewart. So that was, I think he ran 24:56.
So,
Kathy Martin. Yeah, Kathy Martin, I think I mentioned, is probably Long Island's greatest runner. And you may have seen her.
we did at Crim, but she's from
Oh.
Long Island, right?
Yeah, from Canada originally.
Oh.
Lives on Long Island, and she's now in Medicare commercials,
Oh.
in black and white, being one of the greatest runners of all time.
Oh, no kidding. I have to watch for her. Yeah.
Northport
Yeah,
Running Club.
She held quite a few records, as I understand.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, she held quite a few records, as I understand. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the competition is a little bit different, I imagine.
Right.
The race courses are a little bit different, but what are some of the things that you see that are the same between Long Island running and Michigan running?
Many great 10Ks. Cow Harbor is one of the top ones in the country, and we often get some of the best people there. I think Barbara Gubbins, one of Long Island's best runners, ran against Joan Benoit not too long ago, and Joan Benoit is, the gold standard. And my wife Tony ran a Richmond Marathon back in 1987 or so, and she ran a 4:03, and she was headed under 4 hours, except Lee's Revenge got to them, this giant hill, and it was a hot day, 75. And she came in third, and somebody was saying as she went by, hey, look, there goes a woman. And nowadays, everybody almost is a woman. There are more women in marathon running than there are men at this point. and they owe it all to Catherine Switzer and so on. And like I was just saying, Tony came in third in that, and my brother-in-law came in first in some marathon out near San Francisco. And I never, I've done some pretty good things in running, like Ann Arbor, when it was like 16:53 at 50. I managed to beat Bill Stewart by 1 second. He was in a different race, so for your best of times, I was first, Bill was second. I couldn't believe it. He was the national champion at the mile. But Tony, she got that prize, and I never won a prize in a marathon. I was just crying about how my Boston marathon qualifier, I ran 2:56 and came in like 13th in the 35 to 39 age group in a not a huge race, the Long Island Marathon.
Well, what that does is point out something that you saw the change from hardly any women running to more women than men running. What did you think as that change happened?
Good change. It's certainly democratic. It invites everyone, and it's a community activity. And one reason Glory Days exists is because, I managed to save and squirrel away many of those results to send into Michigan Runner, Island Wide Runner, Footnotes, and could write stories about 1,000 races that I'd run and some of the best runners in the races, all of whom are heroes in one way or another. And of course, the backstory is kid who can't buy a varsity letter, Dearborn High, ends up, 8th in the USA in a 5K 50 to 54. And I think the way that I managed to do that, because I was not running that well at 40, I was running pretty well at 40. I was just trying to hang on to those times to 50. I was reading one article about Richmond. No race is perfect, but Richmond was one of the best. About the Richmond.
8K.
Yeah, it was an 8K. Yeah, and I think I ran like a 28:55 for that almost 5 mile race, and it was and ended up number 1 on your best of times. And so Vince Lombardi strikes again. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter whether you win or lose or how well you do. You see some of your best friends and you make new friends, and runners are a noble breed. And, the demographic is for everyone. So,
Maury, it's been so much fun talking to you about your running travels, your running adventures, and congratulations on a great running career, and we'll see you on the roads.